Hello, listeners from the Pink Universe, and welcome to another of our interviews with some of the award winners from the Pink Elephant Conference. And interestingly, today we're talking to Brian Newcomb, who's the Associate Director of IT Service Management at the Ohio State University. Hi, Brian.
Hello, Rob. Hello, everyone.
G'day. So the interesting thing about talking to Brian is that we have in fact interviewed Brian before, because Ohio State University won the EITL Project of the Year for 2011, and we talked then. But this year, Brian won Practitioner of the Year. Congratulations, Brian.
Thank you.
And so, you know, we've got a wonderful excuse to talk to you again and to sort of learn a little about what might have changed at Ohio State and changed in your head about service management since the last time we talked to you. So I think that's great. So not everybody on this call will have seen that first interview. So let's just start out, Brian. Give us a brief synopsis of you know, who you are and what you do at Ohio State.
Sure, thanks. So I've been at Ohio State working in some capacity for the last 15 years. Most recently, for about the last 4 years, my focus has been on IT service management. We've been trying to adopt ITIL best practices and kind of get the organization to follow some defined, documented process, consistent process. And from about 2008, 2009, we formally launched a program, which was to be a series of projects to do this across the organization. So it was that we first started our first process was incident management. We got a new tool, process, everything kind of went through. That was the project that you're talking about. Went well, and you know, we've been chugging along ever since. There's obviously a lot of work to do, and a lot of processes that need improving or implementing. And that's kind of been the crux of my work. I've been the program director for that initiative for the last 3 or 4 years.
Great gig. Interesting stuff.
Always fun.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that then. So since we last talked to you, where you were bedding down incident management, would that be a fair description? Give us a little bit about, you know, how's incident management gone, and what else have you looked at in the time since we last spoke?
Sure. Yeah. So, incident management, I won't say winding down. We've put it into continual improvement. The initial kind of rollout has been completed, and really we're getting a lot of benefit from it. It's working well. Folks have embraced it. You know, obviously we're seeing improvements, not only improvements in our metrics and measurements that we have, but the fact that we're able to get reliable metrics and data on the process it was a huge improvement that we've got from that project. The other thing, you know, with Incident is now we've actually started bringing in distributed IT service providers across campus. Obviously, we're a very large distributed campus. A number of colleges, departments, regional campuses have their own IT operations. We'd like to try and work more as one and collaborate better. And we've actually been able to start rolling out the use of our consistent process and tool for incident management to some of the distributed IT organizations, and do it in a way that allows us to collaborate so that, you know, at the end user level, they don't need to be too concerned with, who provides this particular service and who do I call if it breaks. You know, we should be able to work together, and we're on the path now to do that. So that's enabled us to start down that path on the bigger picture. Internally, within the central IT organization, which is the office of the CIO, we still have obviously a lot of things that we want to kind of tidy up and improve. Since Incident, we've tackled problem management, change management. We've also started to, we did produce our service catalog through service catalog management. But really now the focus is about better defining what's in that catalog. So we need to go back kind of and backtrack a little bit and do the service level management kind of activities. We want to measure ourselves on services and our service performance, but very few services have had a formal agreement about what that service is, what folks should be able to expect from it, and what we're going to measure. So that's really the crux of the work. Big effort over the next 12 months to do that. We want to measure ourselves on our services, and it's very hard to do that if we haven't formally agreed to what that service is or what it does.
Wow, you've got a lot done since we last talked. Really,
we've dabbled in a lot of things. Incident was a big project for us. It was a all hands on deck kind of project, and a lot of resource, a lot of org change, a lot of training obviously went into that, which is, I strongly feel why it was so successful. And with the others, somewhat of a different course. We wanted to try and see if we could maybe use some less resource or start in a lighter way, to get things rolled out so that we could tackle some other things or more than just one thing at a time, right? And that's been a tricky balance, if you want to get the same results as we found. So I'm sure we can probably talk more about that.
Yeah, let's talk more about that, because that's really interesting. Is listening to you, it seems to me like maybe you need to do that big bang at the start to create momentum and get people thinking, wow, this is real and this is significant and so on. And then it's interesting that you then shifted to a more incremental well, not incremental, but it's interesting that you did then break it down a little bit, because we were talking before this interview briefly about this idea of being a bit more granular about how you do this stuff. And so just explore that a bit more for us. How you said you used the word dabbled, and I'm sure it was more serious than that, but the structure around how you've approached a number of things, problem and change and a bit of catalog and so on, all at one time, it is a different approach to how you went to incident, isn't it?
Yes. Obviously, a couple factors there. One is, we recognize we can't do it all at once, especially if we do it, I'll say, quote unquote, the right way. I would think incident was the right way. Obviously, it was successful for us. It was the right way. But to do one at a time with that full resource commitment, it wasn't going to get us where we needed to fast enough. I mean, you think about, it's like, we got to stop the bleeding. We've got to get some things under control here. We want to do so much at once. So, we wanted to try and take an approach where we could start a couple of different things. At the same time, remember there's obviously, we're not, putting up the closed for renovation sign. We are doing so many other things within the organization, and we're not able to kind of shut down for retooling for, 9 months. We got to do this, while we're proceeding with many other top priority projects. So, when we first started the program, high motivation, high urgency to get stuff going. And I think we set the expectation appropriately that, what we want to do in IT service management is going to take time. Maturity takes time. And it's going to take several years to get where we want with all the processes that we had talked about. And I think people get that and they understand that. But when push comes to shove, after a year and a half or so, other things come up, and you can say it's still very important and we still want to do it, but the reality is, everything can't be top importance, and, the business is going to be handing you things that have to get done, and some of these internal improvements, as important as they are, they're not outwardly visible, so it's hard to, it's difficult to prioritize those higher than some of those business objectives. So, anyway, for those reasons, and we looked at incident and saw how successful it was and how much resource it took, and he kind of was like, well, would we be able to start on some of this stuff with less? And we said, well, sure, we can start on it with less, and we did, and but what we found with change management, incident management, 6 months from process design to go live, right? And we took time after that to what we call anchor it, and the project itself was formally open for 12 months, but really 6 months time to sit the first people down in ITIL training to we're all, as an organization, trained using the new process, new tool. Change management, we just formally closed this month, and that was a duration of a little over 18 months to deploy, to get all areas. We did a phased implementation, but a little over 18 months. And it's nowhere near anchored the way incident was. We didn't do the same level of training and org change, and obviously we're seeing that in the process and the maturity of it right now. So we've got to go back and do that. So I think what we found in that respect was, yes, we could do it with less, we could start with less, but it's not going to be the same. It's going to take us longer, or the quality, the anchoring, you're going to have to go back and do it later. Pay me now or pay me later. And that's, I think, what we're finding.
So that's interesting that in approaching change, you've taken a more informal or a smaller scale project approach to that, and not so much to say pay the price, but the result is something that's not as bedded down as it was with incident, and going forward you'll do some more work on that, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It doesn't have to be perfect from day one, and it wasn't in your case, and you do need to keep growing it. But I'm getting the sense that that's not a bad thing, that you feel like what you've got with change is good enough for what you invested, and that you can do the additional work going forward, and that you don't, that you're happy with that outcome. Would that be a fair statement?
It depends. It depends who you ask, right? Because some of the folks that, given an 18-month duration, even if we didn't put in the same amount of hours, given the duration, I think we do want it to be, and really did expect it to be, I think, a little further along. Okay. And like I said, we're continually working on that to bring it where we'd like to have it. So I think it depends who you ask, and I think, to your point, very acceptable approach. I think the key, the lesson learned there is in setting the expectation with your stakeholders. If we're going to, use this much resource or take this much time or do it in this fashion, this is what you should expect at the end. And I think maybe we could have done a better job with that. And in fact, I think it was a learning process for us to see. I almost think that incident was so easy that we figured, well, they'll all be this easy, right? And I don't want, not to say that incident was easy. Not to say that we made it look easy, but in some fashion we did. I mean, but again, if you look at the numbers and you look at the resources and the hours and everything that was put into it, I mean, obviously you can see where that comes from. But on the surface, it really went out without a hitch. That go live date was a non-event. And, I think there was some sense that this isn't as bad. This isn't that hard. We can do this. We can take on more, or, not use as much resource. And again, if you do that, I think we want to be clear on the expectation, because it did yield a different result, both in duration and end game maturity. And, we do want to go back and shore that back up.
Right. And you looked at problem as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, it was another one, again, we took a little bit, a little bit of a scaled down approach to that. And that one was okay. The interesting thing for us with problem was, as we got into it, very similar to incident in a lot of the details of the process. Because we had already trained folks on the process of incident so in depth, really a lot of the basics with problem were there for us. It wasn't a stretch to train them on, but the difference between an incident and a problem and how they relate to each other. But then again, how you go about taking that problem and working it through the process, a little more comfortable for folks, right? So we did that, and on that one we took a kind of a start-in approach and set that expectation accordingly, that, right off the bat, we're going to focus on problem management for our most severe incidents. So, major incidents, P1, P2 for us, that's going to be problem management for us. We're going to start in on this, say, look, anytime we have a major incident, we're going to refer that in, we're going to do our problem management process. We're going to start there. And that was a good way, I think that was a good ease in for us on problem management.
Good. And I was interested in your comments on catalog too, of course. So, it seems almost universal that when we look at service management in organizations, we kind of, if you look at the ITIL life cycle from strategy, to improvement, it's almost like we always start in the middle with things like incident and problem and change, and then we kind of work out back and forward in the cycle. We go back into portfolio and catalog and strategic stuff, and we go forward into improvement programs. And we sort of, I don't know, every organization I talk to, it seems like we start in the middle and then backfill both ways. So catalog's a good example of that, right? Where you would love to have had the catalog before you ever did even incident.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. We would have loved to have that because in our incident forms, the categorization is all based on the service and the service catalog and how we categorize it in the catalog. So we didn't have that when we started, so we winged it and did the best that we knew. And inevitably then, once we had our catalog, we had to go back, and that was a significant change to redo all that, and then the data integrity of previous records and so forth. It would have been great to have that starting off, but we didn't. But it was the very next thing for us, at least to get the catalog piece. Agree on a common definition of service, take a look at what we do and try and filter it into the services that we provide. And that was the business catalog, so that was what we produced out of that. Now, the descriptions and what shows up in the catalog at that point is based on whatever the point of contact, I'll call it at the time, right, our service owner, gave us, right? Better, it's a step forward. That was our iteration. But now, we are wanting to leverage that published service catalog as a way to publish the SLA commitment. What should folks expect from this service in terms of, availability or incident resolution time, request fulfillment, that sort of thing. So, to do that, we need to go back and have those conversations and get the agreements, and then we can, refine the description that we've published for those services to include those commitment levels. And that's a big task.
It is. It's a really interesting task. Usually, suddenly you're into the politics and the structural arrangements between IT and its customers, and you're flushing out a lot of stuff that maybe some people's left kind of ignored. You bring up some painful things sometimes when you do that SLA work. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of really good questions. I mean, it's interesting to see how many services we can't tell you who's the customer, who do we go to, who's on the other end of the agreement for some of these things. Very interesting conversations around that.
Really fundamental questions. Amazing, isn't it?
Yes, fundamental questions, and when you ask them, you get the crickets, but a really good discussion ensues.
And so going forward, as well as that, you now want to start exploring measuring service and reporting that stuff. Obviously, the SLAs are a pretty major input into that, to have your service level targets that you can measure against. Mm-hmm. What are some of the other aspects of measurement you're going to be looking at?
Yeah, so that's a big step for us this year. In fact, we've recently revised our strategic plan, and really it's clear the focus is on the services that we provide and how the services align to the university's goals and so forth. So really encouraging. It's a huge step for us, I think. And then the question comes to, okay, well, how are you going to measure your performance? How are you going to measure if you're living up to what you say you're going to do? And we feel one of the main, it's not the end all, but one of the main things is the service performance and how well, really from two perspectives. Internally, how well is it meeting the commitments that we made? And then externally, based on the, survey feedback from customers, from users, and from general polling, general impression from the outside. So.
So that'll be, maybe we'll get the opportunity to talk to you next year about how that went. I think that would be an interesting follow-up interview.
Absolutely, yeah. The other big thing that for us is on the process side to get more visibility on the process measurements. Obviously, those are under the covers. Those are going to support that. If your processes are healthy, it's likely that you're more likely to be meeting your SLA commitments, and your customers are more likely to be happy. But we hadn't had a good way to really make visible the process measurements. So we've defined process metrics, every time we define a process, but they'd kind of been sitting. So one of the big things we're trying to do right now is bring them together in some sort of a balanced scorecard to look at process health in general and be able to drill down to all the different processes that we've defined and see how their measurements are shaping up and how their measurements affect in some way an overall process health score. So that's kind of what I've been working on recently.
Interesting. Very interesting. So interesting times at Ohio State. Good luck with all of that, Brian, and I hope it goes as well as it has done for the past 2 years that I've been talking to you. And
I think so.
Will we see you at Pink 13? Do you reckon?
The plans are to be there at this point. So I look forward to seeing you as well, and anyone else out there. You'll be able to find me there.
Excellent. We'll see you then. Thanks very much, Brian.
Thank you, Rob. Pleasure.
Bye.